And now, to pay tribute to Ozzy, Chad Smith, Robert Trujillo, Adam Wakeman.
I work out every day. But I had no choice because, the doctors were telling me I was slowly, well, not slowly.
Andrew Watt, Billy Idol, Steve Stevens, Zach Wilde, Jelly Roll, and to start it off...
What if I told you that one of rock's greatest legends knew exactly when he was going to die? And what if I told you that just days before his final breath, he shared a secret with his best friend that would break your heart? Today, we're going to talk about the final days of Ozzy Osbourne and the devastating truth he revealed to Tony Iommi that nobody saw coming. Before we dive into this emotional story, please hit that like button if you're a fan of rock music and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about music legends. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Picture this. It's July 22nd, 2025. The world wakes up to news that nobody wanted to hear. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself, had passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 76. Fans around the globe were devastated. But what most people didn't know was that Ozzy had been preparing for this moment for weeks, maybe even months. The story I'm about to tell you isn't just about death. It's about friendship, courage, and how one man decided to say goodbye on his own terms. And it all started with one final concert that nobody realized would be a farewell. Let me take you back to July 5th, 2025. Villa Park Stadium in Birmingham, England was packed with over 45,000 screaming fans. Another 5.8 million people were watching from home around the world. They thought they were coming to see a celebration, a homecoming show for Birmingham's most famous son. Nobody knew they were actually witnessing the end of an era. Ozzy couldn't stand on stage that night. Years of battling Parkinson's disease and multiple back surgeries had taken their toll on his body. Instead, he sat on a specially made leather throne with wings, like some kind of rock and roll king. It sounded dramatic, but when you saw him up there, it was actually beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The concert was called Back to the Beginning, and that title meant everything. This was where it all started for Ozzy and his bandmates in Black Sabbath. This was their hometown, the place where they grew up as poor kids dreaming of something bigger than factory jobs and gray skies. For the first time in 20 years, the original Black Sabbath lineup was back together. Ozzy, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward were all on stage, older and weathered but still powerful. Famous bands like Metallica, Slayer, and Guns N' Roses also performed that night to honor them. But the real magic happened when Ozzy started singing. Even though his body was failing him, his voice was still incredible. He poured every ounce of strength he had left into each song. People in the crowd were crying, not just from joy, but because they could feel something ending. They just didn't know what. Behind the scenes, things were different. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's oldest friend and bandmate, noticed that something was wrong. Ozzy looked exhausted, more tired than he'd ever seen him. During rehearsals, they had to limit how much time Ozzy spent on stage because he needed so much rest between songs. After the show ended, there were no big parties or celebrations. Ozzy was wheeled into his dressing room, completely drained. But before he left, he made sure to visit Tony. He rolled his wheelchair into Tony's room, managed a tired smile, and said something simple but meaningful. It went all right, didn't it? Those few words said everything. It was Ozzy's way of asking if he had done okay, if he had given the fans what they deserved one last time. Tony knew his friend was struggling, but he had no idea what Ozzy would tell him in private just days later. The concert raised an amazing 140 million euros for Parkinson's research and Birmingham Children's Hospital. But the real impact wasn't about money. It was about watching a man who refused to give up, even when his body was giving up on him. Now, let me tell you about the friendship that made all of this so special. Ozzy and Tony's story began long before they were famous. They were just two kids from Aston, a working-class area of Birmingham, who met at school in the early 1960s. Ozzy, whose real name was John Michael Osbourne, was the class clown. He was loud, funny, and always getting into trouble. He had a hard time with reading and writing, but he could make anyone laugh, even on the worst days. Tony was the opposite. He was quiet, serious, and watched everything carefully. He was the kind of kid who thought deeply about life, even when he was young. They lived just streets apart, and both of their families struggled with money. They shared the same fear that many kids in their neighborhood had, that they'd end up working in factories their whole lives, just like their parents. But they also shared something else, a love for music and a dream of escaping their circumstances. They weren't best friends right away, but over time, they grew closer. They would walk home from school together, hang out in the neighborhood, and eventually start talking about music. Before anyone knew the name Black Sabbath, before Ozzy became the Prince of Darkness, they were just two boys who believed they could create something special. And create something special they did. In 1970, Black Sabbath released their first album, and it changed music forever. They didn't just start a band. They created an entirely new type of music called heavy metal. Their sound was dark, heavy, and unlike anything anyone had heard before. Songs like Iron Man, War Pigs, and Paranoid became anthems for people who felt misunderstood or left out. Ozzy's powerful voice combined with Tony's incredible guitar playing created magic. They weren't just making music, they were giving a voice to everyone who felt like an outsider. Throughout the 1970s, Black Sabbath became one of the biggest bands in the world. They sold over 75 million records and influenced countless other musicians. Bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Slayer all say that Black Sabbath inspired them to start playing music. But success came with a price. The pressure of fame, constant touring, and personal struggles began to tear the band apart. By the late 1970s, Ozzy was battling serious problems with drugs and alcohol. His behavior became unpredictable, and he missed rehearsals and shows. In 1979, Tony had to make one of the hardest decisions of his life. He had to ask Ozzy to leave Black Sabbath. It wasn't because he was angry. It was because he was watching his best friend slowly destroy himself, and he didn't know how to save him. Tony later said, "We were watching him die slowly, and we didn't know how to save him." It was heartbreaking for everyone involved, especially because their friendship went so much deeper than just music. After leaving Black Sabbath, Ozzy's life got even more chaotic. He had run-ins with the law, went to rehab multiple times, and had several close calls that nearly killed him. But somehow, he managed to turn his life around. He became a successful solo artist with hits like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley, proving that he wasn't finished yet. Black Sabbath continued with other singers, and they made great music. But everyone knew something was missing. The special chemistry between Ozzy and Tony couldn't be replaced. For over 30 years, fans dreamed of seeing the original Black Sabbath back together. There were rumors and false starts, but nothing ever happened. Then, in 2011, something amazing occurred. Ozzy and Tony sat down together and started talking again. Despite all the years of separation, all the hurt feelings and missed opportunities, their connection was still there. They laughed together, shared memories, and most importantly, they forgave each other. From that reunion came healing, and eventually, new music. In 2013, Black Sabbath released an album called 13, their first studio album with Ozzy in 35 years. It went to #1 in multiple countries, including the UK and the US. It proved that their music was timeless and that their fans had never forgotten them. They went on a world tour called The End, which was supposed to be their final goodbye to performing. But as we now know, that wasn't really the end. The real end came with that final concert in Birmingham in 2025. Now, let me tell you about what happened in those final days and the heartbreaking secret Ozzy shared with Tony. On July 21st, just 2 weeks after that final concert, Ozzy passed away peacefully at his home, surrounded by his wife Sharon and their children. The world was shocked and heartbroken. News outlets struggled to find the right words, and fans gathered outside his childhood home to leave flowers and candles. But it was Tony's reaction that hit everyone the hardest. The morning after Ozzy died, Tony gave an emotional interview that broke hearts around the world. His voice was shaking, not with stage power like it did during concerts, but with pure grief. Tony admitted that losing Ozzy hadn't fully hit him until the day after. He said, "I woke up and it hit me like a ton of bricks. But then he shared something that made everything even more devastating. Just hours before Ozzy died, Tony had received a text message from his old friend. The message was simple but haunting. Ozzy said he was really tired and had no energy left. When Tony read those words, he knew something was terribly wrong. Looking back, Tony realized that all the signs had been there. During rehearsals for that final concert, Ozzy looked frail and weak. They had to be careful about how much time he spent on stage because his body couldn't handle the strain. Behind the scenes, it wasn't about putting on a perfect show. It was about giving Ozzy a chance to say goodbye to the fans who had supported him for over 50 years. But here's the part that will break your heart. Tony revealed that Ozzy had known this was going to be his last performance. Ozzy never said it directly, but Tony could feel it. He said, "I think he knew it was the last one." He never said it, but you could feel it. Then Tony shared the most heartbreaking detail of all. Weeks before the concert, Ozzy had quietly told him about his final wish. He didn't want a big farewell tour or a lot of attention. He just wanted one last chance to thank his fans in the place where his career began. He wanted to perform one more time in Birmingham, his hometown. Tony remembered Ozzy saying he wanted to go out doing what he loved and where it all started. That's all he ever asked for. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a marketing strategy. This was a dying man who wanted to say thank you to the people who had made his dreams come true. He wanted to give them one final gift, even though it would cost him everything he had left. The realization that Ozzy had been planning his own farewell all along was almost too much to bear. Tony wasn't just losing a bandmate or musical partner. He was losing his brother, his oldest friend, the person who had shared his journey from the very beginning. Tony put it perfectly when he said, "Geezer, Bill and I, we didn't just lose a bandmate. We lost our brother." For Tony, this loss was foundational. Ozzy was the voice that brought his guitar riffs to life, the chaos that balanced his calm, the madness that gave structure to his music. Their bond wasn't created by record contracts or fame. It was forged in the smoky streets of Birmingham, in schoolyard laughs, and in the dreams of two working-class boys who dared to imagine something bigger than their circumstances. When Tony spoke about losing Ozzy, people around the world felt his pain. Not just because he was a musical legend, but because in his grief, they saw their own. Everyone could relate to losing someone who had shaped their life, someone whose presence had become part of their identity. But Tony also shared beautiful memories that reminded everyone of who Ozzy really was behind all the fame and controversy. He remembered how Ozzy would make funny faces in the middle of serious songs, how he could break tension with a perfectly timed joke, how he never lost his sense of humor, even when things got tough. He'd pull a face right in the middle of a song, Tony said with a smile, his voice cracking with emotion, and I'd just lose it. That was his gift too, making the serious feel human. Those moments weren't rehearsed or planned. They were pure Ozzy, unpredictable, genuine, and full of a light that no amount of darkness could ever extinguish. Tony also remembered the comeback, when they reunited in 2013. Despite all the years apart, all the pain and missed opportunities, they found their rhythm again. Not just musically, but as brothers. Ozzy had said back then, with tears in his eyes and laughter in his voice, "We're lucky bastards, aren't we? Still alive, still screaming." But there was one moment that haunted Tony more than any other. Just days before their final concert, Ozzy looked at him and said something that Tony will never forget. "I'm not sure I'll survive this show, mate. But if I'm going out, let be while I'm singing in Birmingham, not rotting in a hospital bed." Tony didn't know how to respond at the time. What do you say to something like that? But now those words echo louder than any guitar riff. They show that Ozzy didn't just accept his fate, he chose it. He decided to end his life on his own terms, doing what he loved in the place where it all began. "We think he knew," Tony said later. "He chose to close his life where it all began, with us, with music." That was his way of saying thank you. That final concert wasn't about entertainment or spectacle. It was about reclaiming control over his final breath. Not as a patient in a hospital, but as a performer on stage. Not in silence, but surrounded by music and the people who loved him. When Ozzy sat in that custom-built leather throne, eyes burning with fatigue and determination, holding the microphone like it was the last thing connecting him to this world. He gave everything he had left. His pain, his joy, his entire legacy was poured into every note he sang. And then, quietly and with dignity, he rolled off stage and into memory. For Tony, that night wasn't just a performance. It was closure. It was the final page in a story that had been written over 50 years with ink made of guitar riffs, screams, laughter, and pain. At Ozzy's memorial service, Tony's voice wavered, but he stood tall, as if he was borrowing strength from his fallen brother. He told the sea of mourners, "This isn't goodbye. This is thank you for every scream, for every laugh, for every scar, and every song." He left like a king, quietly, with dignity, with music. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved, no one spoke. The air was thick with memory, grief, and a unity that only true legends can create. Fans stood shoulder to shoulder, some crying, some smiling through tears, all remembering not just the icon but the man. Ozzy Osbourne's legacy lives on in every backstage story, every haunting lyric, every mischievous moment that made him human. He wasn't just part of music history. He bent history around him. He redefined what it meant to be broken and brilliant at the same time. In doing so, he gave generations of people permission to be loud, to be flawed, to be real. Tony now carries forward the silence that Ozzy left behind. But it's not an empty silence. It's full of meaning, full of legacy, full of love. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever had to say goodbye to someone who shaped your soul? A friend, a family member, someone whose voice became part of your heartbeat? It's one of the most painful experiences we can go through as human beings. But Ozzy's story teaches us something important. Even when we know the end is coming, we still have choices. We can choose how we face it, who we face it with, and what we leave behind. Ozzy chose to face his end with courage, surrounded by music and the people he loved most. His final secret wasn't really a secret at all. It was a lesson about living and dying with dignity. It was about the power of friendship that survives everything: fame, addiction, separation, and even death. It was about never forgetting where you came from or the people who helped you become who you are. When Tony said, "There will never be another Ozzy," he wasn't just talking about his musical talent or his stage presence. He was talking about his spirit, his authenticity, his refusal to be anything other than exactly who he was. Ozzy wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, struggled with addiction, and hurt people he cared about. But he was real. He was human. And in the end, he was loved not despite his flaws, but because of his honesty about them. His music became more than entertainment. It became a sanctuary for people who felt like outsiders, who struggled with their own demons, who needed to know they weren't alone. From the front rows of sold-out arenas to the quiet corners of hospital rooms where fans fought their own battles, Ozzy's voice provided comfort and strength. That's what makes him immortal. He wasn't just the voice of a music genre. He was the heartbeat of a movement that said it's okay to be different, it's okay to struggle, and it's okay to find your own way through the darkness. As we remember Ozzy Osbourne and the heartbreaking secret he shared with Tony Iommi in his final days, let's also remember the lesson he taught us about friendship, courage, and staying true to yourself no matter what life throws at you. His echo lives on in every person who has ever felt misunderstood and found solace in his music. It lives on in every friendship that survives the test of time. And it lives on in the reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply be ourselves, flaws and all. If Ozzy's story has touched your heart, if his music ever carried you through a difficult time, or if you believe in the power of friendship like the one between Ozzy and Tony, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about music legends who changed the world. And let us know in the comments below, what's your favorite Ozzy Osbourne memory or song? Because for those who truly listened, Ozzy Osbourne never really left us. His voice, his spirit, and his message live on in all of us. There will truly never be another Ozzy, and that's exactly how it should be.